Thousands of people took to the streets in Niger's capital, Niamey, today. We were out and saw some of these protesters. They were blocking traffic, they were congesting the streets, but for the most part, what we saw was peaceful until it wasn't. A group of these protesters moved to the French embassy where they attacked the perimeter of the French embassy, setting one of the doors on fire, throwing rocks, breaking windows until security forces showed up and were able to move them away. Now, the protesters never breached the perimeter and actually entered into the French embassy. But most of these protesters appear to be in favor.
Can stronger organizations than ECOWAS be formed in Africa? 3 nations have united to oppose the puppet-like ECOWAS. In just a few weeks, ECOWAS's influence has significantly weakened. After all, how long can such manipulation be sustained? A new pact has been signed by Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. The animosity from France channeled through ECOWAS towards the junta leaders has finally produced a tangible result. And this outcome is unlikely to favor France. Does this signal the final nail in ECOWAS's coffin? Let's find out. The military leaders of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have signed a new pact, signaling their intent to form a united front as they turn away from the Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS. This move comes after a year marked by coups and crises in these countries, leading to suspensions and sanctions by ECOWAS. But what would this mean for Africa? Well, before that, let's understand the background of this recent news. Why has the hatred against ECOWAS reached a point where a new alliance in its opposition was a necessity?
It's obvious. It's the lack of support the countries felt during their period of democratic experience. You will recall that these 3 countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, had to overthrow a democratically elected president through coup, which is not in alignment with the ECOWAS principle. So this misunderstanding could have been settled better than what we had, and I think that's the main factor. You know, those countries felt like they didn't get enough support from the regional body, and I think from the regional body there were a lot of pressures from other Western nations to maintain democracy.
Over the past year, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have experienced significant political upheaval, marked by military coups that have overthrown their respective governments. These actions have plunged the region into a state of crisis, creating ripples that have reverberated far beyond their borders. The political instability in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader historical context shaped by colonialism and neo-colonialism. But more than it has bothered Africa, this has bothered the West, particularly France. Well, France in this context has a very interesting story. France, the former colonial power, has maintained a significant influence over its former colonies in West Africa. This influence manifests through economic ties, political alliances, and military interventions. The coups in these countries can be seen as a reaction to decades of perceived interference and control by France, which has often been accused of prioritizing its interests over the needs and aspirations of the African people. So, France wanted a hold, and to end that, a coup was initiated. And now France is bothered by this coup. This is the story so far. And how did ECOWAS come into this equation? The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, ostensibly an organization aimed at promoting economic integration and stability in the region, has often been criticized for acting as a proxy for French interests. In the wake of the recent coup, ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. These sanctions were widely viewed as punitive measures, designed to punish the new leadership for defying France's influence. The decision to impose sanctions appeared to be less about upholding democratic principles and more about reasserting control over the region. ECOWAS in Africa is mainly representing France. We know the reaction of Western powers, particularly France, to the coups in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso has been marked by condemnation and calls for the restoration of democratic governance. And naturally, ECOWAS also hated the coups, just like France did. This all was not just shown like this. France and ECOWAS didn't say we crave our holdback on Africa. Instead, they said they don't like the instability in Africa. And interestingly, they could only see the instability in nations with junta leaders. And how were the conditions in France? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. To worry about instability in other nations, one must be prosperous. So, have a look at what's going on in France.
There are 7 of us here, all refugees. Some of us were waiting in Paris for them to renew our paperwork or give us accommodation. But you have to show up in front of the authorities in person. We've been stuck here for a month now.
The second round, it was expected to lead to a National Rally absolute majority in the National Assembly, but that didn't happen. Why? Because other parties, and most notably left-wing parties, created a popular front. How that effectively worked was that candidates dropped out of some multi-candidates.
Macron et Gabriel Attal avec les formations d'extrême gauche privent ce soir les Français d'une politique de redressement qu'ils ont pourtant plébiscité largement en nous plaçant en tête des élections européennes, puis dimanche dernier, lors du premier tour avec près de 34% des suffrages exprimés. Ce soir, ces accords électoraux jettent la France dans les bras de l'extrême gauche de Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Privé des millions de Français.
Anyway, it was still said that France and ECOWAS care about Africa. However, this has been met with skepticism by many Africans who view it as hypocritical. For years, Western governments have supported authoritarian regimes in Africa when it suited their strategic interests. The sudden concern for democracy seems disingenuous to locals, given the long history of exploitation and interference in African affairs. The term neocolonialism aptly describes the ongoing dynamics between Africa and the West. Despite gaining formal independence, many African countries remain economically dependent on their former colonial rulers. This dependence is maintained through mechanisms such as trade agreements, foreign aid, and the presence of multinational corporations. The locals also knew the recent coups were an attempt by the new leaders to break free from this cycle of dependency and assert true sovereignty. Coming back to ECOWAS's puppetry. ECOWAS's actions in response to the coups highlight its role as a tool of French influence. By imposing sanctions, ECOWAS effectively acted as an enforcer of France's will, attempting to coerce the new leaders into submission. This has led to widespread resentment and a growing anti-French sentiment among the populations of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The perception that ECOWAS is not acting in the best interests of West Africans, but rather serving the agenda of a foreign power, has undermined its legitimacy. And the response from the public was media didn't lose hope and kept feeding the world their delusion. They largely portrayed the coups in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso as undemocratic power grabs. This narrative overlooks the legitimate grievances of the people and the broader historical context. It also fails to acknowledge the widespread support that the new leaders enjoy among their populations. For many, the coups represent a rejection of a system that has perpetuated inequality and exploitation. The portrayal of these events in Western media serves to reinforce the existing power structures and delegitimize the efforts of those seeking to chart a new course. ECOWAS, now ECOWAS, was presenting a huge issue to nations. It wanted to pressurize the nations. So, what did nations do in return? This brings us to the recent news that we begin with. In response to the sanctions imposed by ECOWAS and their marginalization, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso took a decisive and unprecedented step. They renounced their membership in ECOWAS and formed a new bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States. This nascent alliance represents a significant shift in the political landscape of the Sahel region, aiming to foster stronger security cooperation, economic integration, and regional stability among its members. This move, bold and resolute, signals a clear intent to forge a path of greater autonomy and self-determination, free from the overbearing influence of external powers. The Alliance of Sahel States is founded on three core objectives: enhancing security cooperation, promoting economic integration, and ensuring regional stability. The Sahel region has long been plagued by insurgency and terrorism. The new alliance aims to coordinate and strengthen military efforts to combat these threats. By pooling resources, sharing intelligence, and conducting joint operations, the member states hope to create a more secure and stable environment. This security cooperation is envisioned as a departure from reliance on external military assistance, particularly from France, which has maintained a significant military presence in the region under the pretext of counterterrorism. Economic challenges are central to the instability in the Sahel. The alliance seeks to promote economic integration by fostering trade, investment, and infrastructure development among its members. By creating a unified economic front, the member states aim to reduce dependency on external aid and trade relations that often come with strings attached. This economic integration is seen as crucial for sustainable development and poverty reduction in the region. Stability in the Sahel is contingent upon addressing both security and economic issues. The alliance aims to create a stable political environment where member states can govern without undue external interference. This includes promoting good governance, respecting human rights, and fostering political inclusivity. The member states recognize that political stability is essential for economic growth and security. And how did ECOWAS respond to this? The renunciation of ECOWAS membership by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, and the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States sent shockwaves through the region and beyond. ECOWAS, already grappling with internal divisions and criticisms of its effectiveness, faced a significant blow to its credibility and influence. The international community, particularly Western powers with vested interests in the region, reacted with a mix of concern and condemnation. ECOWAS's initial reaction to the renunciation was one of alarm and urgency. The organization called an emergency summit to address the situation, where member states deliberated on the implications of losing three key members. The summit was marked by heated debates and a sense of betrayal, as ECOWAS leaders struggled to understand the motivations behind the defection and to formulate a unified response. The defection of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso highlighted long-standing grievances within ECOWAS. These countries cited a lack of genuine support for their security concerns, particularly in combating terrorism and insurgency. They also criticized the organization for being overly influenced by external powers, particularly France, which many saw as prioritizing its geopolitical interests over the needs of the region. In response, ECOWAS leaders emphasized the need for unity and collective action. They expressed disappointment over the decision of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to break away, arguing that such actions would only weaken the region's ability to tackle its challenges. The organization announced its intention to engage in dialogue with the defecting countries, hoping to bring them back into the fold. However, the tone of the response was tinged with a mix of reprimand and appeal, reflecting the deep frustration and sense of urgency felt by the remaining member states. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States ASS by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso was seen as a direct challenge to ECOWAS's authority and relevance. The ASS was established with the stated aim of prioritizing the security and development needs of the Sahel region, free from external interference. This move resonated with many in the region who felt that ECOWAS had become too disconnected from the realities on the ground and too beholden to external interests. Has ECOWAS tried to gain back support from African nations that now hate it? In response to the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, ECOWAS has initiated efforts to bring the three countries back into its fold. Led by Senegal's president, these initiatives aim to reconcile differences and restore unity within the region. However, there have been no significant breakthroughs thus far, and the Junta-led countries remain firm in their new direction. Observers suggest that the timing of the new pact was deliberate, intended to demonstrate that Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso can operate independently of ECOWAS. But what ECOWAS is doing? The reconciliation efforts by ECOWAS began with a series of diplomatic missions aimed at opening channels of communication with the defecting nations. high-level envoys from member states were dispatched to Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to engage in direct dialogue with their leaders. These envoys carried messages of unity and cooperation, emphasizing the mutual benefits of regional integration and the importance of collective security and economic development. Despite these efforts, the responses from the junta-led governments were lukewarm, reflecting their determination to pursue a new path. In parallel with these diplomatic overtures, ECOWAS has also sought to address some of the grievances that led to the defection. The organization has announced several initiatives aimed at enhancing its support for member states, particularly in areas related to security and economic development. For example, ECOWAS has pledged to increase funding for its peacekeeping operations and to provide additional resources for counterinsurgency efforts in the Sahel region. These measures are intended to demonstrate ECOWAS's commitment to addressing the security concerns of its members and to rebuilding trust within the organization. One of the key challenges facing ECOWAS in its efforts to regain support is the perception of external influence, particularly from France. Many in the Sahel region view ECOWAS as being overly influenced by Western powers, which they believe prioritize their geopolitical interests over the needs of African nations. To counter this perception, ECOWAS has sought to emphasize its independence and to promote African-led solutions to the region's challenges. This includes increasing the involvement of African experts and institutions in its decision-making processes and reducing reliance on external funding and support. Despite these efforts, the junta-led governments of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso remain skeptical of ECOWAS's intentions. They argue that the organization has failed to adequately support their efforts to combat terrorism and to address the root causes of instability in the region. They also accuse ECOWAS of being complicit in attempts to undermine their sovereignty and impose external agendas. These accusations have been bolstered by the continued presence of French military forces in the Sahel, which many view as a symbol of neo-colonial influence. In response to these criticisms, ECOWAS has sought to engage with a broader range of stakeholders within the defecting countries. This includes reaching out to civil society organizations, traditional leaders, and other influential figures who can help to bridge the divide and to promote dialogue and reconciliation. These efforts have been met with mixed success, as many within these countries remain deeply distrustful of ECOWAS and its motives. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States has also posed a significant challenge to ECOWAS's efforts to regain support. The new alliance, which includes Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, has positioned itself as an alternative to ECOWAS, offering a different vision for regional integration and cooperation. The alliance has emphasized its commitment to addressing the specific needs of the Sahel region, free from external interference. This message has resonated with many in the region who feel that their concerns have been overlooked or marginalized by ECOWAS. So, if the three nations will return to ECOWAS, it appears impossible. Rather, it is possible that the new alliance will get stronger and more nations will leave ECOWAS. Do you think leaving ECOWAS would be the right choice? What's the point of even keeping a so-called organization that is more of a puppet alive? Let us know in the comment section. Should ECOWAS end? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.